Tridot Triathlon Podcast, episode 103. Today we're going to be talking about metabolic efficiency with Chris Hawley, Tridot coach, licensed primary sports nutritionist, and metabolic efficiency certified professional. Let's roll. Welcome to the Tridot Triathlon Podcast. I'm Tridot founder Jeff Boer, and I am so glad you're here today listening and investing in your triathlon performance. Insight truly does change everything, and we're here to share insights that are going to take your triathlon results to the next level. If you're new to the podcast, here's the deal. Tridot is a cloud-based software that uses big data to optimize your training and race results. So you're no longer limited by dead-end training based on theory and templates, tradition, and trial and error. Think of our optimization technology like this. What Google Maps does to route your driving, Tridot does to design your training. Take a test drive and check us out for yourself. Just click on the free trial button at tridot.com. All right, we're rolling. This is Jeff Boer, founder of Tridot, and this is the Tridot Triathlon Podcast. Today we're going to be talking about metabolic efficiency with Tridot coach Chris Hawley, who's also a licensed primary sports nutritionist and a metabolic efficiency level 1 fitness certified professional. Well, Chris, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and let's get going.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jeff. A little bit about me is I'm a licensed primary sports nutritionist through NASN. I'm a metabolic efficiency training specialist, level 1 fitness certified professional, Ironman certified coach, Tridot coach, U.S. Masters swimming coach, and 4-time Ironman finisher. Kind of my backstory here is at one point I was over 400 pounds. I did my first triathlon back in 2010 at a little over 350 pounds and really enjoyed the sport. It was kind of a calling to me. The most confusing part of everything was the nutrition. There's a whole bunch of stuff out there, training of all the physical aspects, but the nutrition was always the confusing part for me. And when I was training for my very first Ironman, I was more or less gaining weight when I was training so much. So that got me to look into more sports nutrition and metabolic efficiency, which kind of got me where I am today. You can kind of see in the picture on our slide, the before picture on the left and the after picture on the right. The before picture, that was at the Escape from Alcatraz Triathlon. And I was weighing at about 260 to 270, just felt gunky through the entire race. And I didn't want to go into my second Ironman in that same condition. And I heard of a book from Bob Seebohar, who's the creator of metabolic efficiency concept of how to utilize better eating habits through training. And that kind of like the light bulb for me is, hey, I've got to do this. And, another quick fun fact about me is I still love cookies and brownies.
Oh, that's great. Got to have your rewards, right? Hard training.
Yeah. And then a quick note is the picture on the right is that's at Ironman Louisville, and I was weighing a little over 205 pounds. So that was almost a 60-pound weight loss in about 8 weeks.
Holy cow.
Which for a lot of people in the fitness industry and the triathlon community is you hear that much weight loss in that short of amount of time, and it's almost unreal and unheard of.
Yeah, that's a small child. That's pretty time loss.
Yeah, and so many people attribute it to, but you were training for an Ironman. But like I said earlier, I was doing the same training for my first Ironman, but I was actually putting on weight, and we'll get into a lot of that stuff later on. What is metabolic efficiency? It's a concept that was created by Bob Seebohar after a lot of his trial and errors with some dietary eating strategies. He came up with the concept for a long-term sustainable way of eating. And what it is, it teaches our body to mobilize a higher amount of the internal fat stores that we have while preserving the internal carbohydrate stores that we have. And when you're this longer endurance athlete, we all know how crucial it is to keep our internal carbohydrate stores nice and high. We've heard carb loading, and then a lot of us have seen what happens when we've completely used up all of our stored carbohydrate stores or glycogen stores.
Yeah.
Not a whole lot of people. I don't think I've seen The Crawl by Julie Moss, but we've seen Paula Newby Fraser in one of her Ironmans where she just crumbled at the end of it. But that's kind of what happens when you run out. You kind of bonk. And
how much do most people have? How much carb and fat stores do we have in our body?
Okay, so internally, even the most leanest athletes have about 60,000 calories of fat versus the 1,600 to about 2,000 stored calories of carbohydrate. The more that we can get our bodies to be able to burn our fat stores when we need to, and be able to turn around and burn our internal carbohydrates when we have to, that's what metabolic efficiency is all about. We do that by using different food strategies and macronutrient proportions to keep our blood sugar nice and stable through the day. And I have here a quick question. What is the main nutrient limiter to performance? It's carbohydrate. Once we run out of carbohydrate in our muscles, our performance is just going to drop. At the same time, with the higher intensities, the more that we can keep that carbohydrate blood sugar in our blood, then we're going to be able to sustain that higher intensity for a longer amount of time. We use kind of two terms in assessing some metabolic efficiency and how well you are at it. When your metabolic flexibility, we define it as a clear capacity to utilize lipids and carbohydrates as fuel and being able to transition between them in response to what we eat or the exercise intensity that we're going to be exercising on. I know there's some literal definition on there, but it's not something that we have to worry about too much for most people. So with metabolic inflexibility, though, is our body, we have an impaired ability to transition between using fat for fuel or sugar for fuel. The source of that problem is in our mitochondria, the kind of the energy factories of our cells, and or insulin resistance, which is a growing concern for a lot of Americans these days with type 2 diabetes, is that insulin resistance. If you're really good and metabolic flexible, then you're going to have a nice, easy time becoming metabolically efficient. But if your body's having a hard time choosing fat for fuel versus carbohydrates, then there's a lot more work that has to be done.
Yeah, makes sense. What's an example of kind of someone who would fit into each of those categories?
Okay. So somebody who's metabolically flexible can be a well-seasoned athlete. When they're training in that zone 2, then we would, unfortunately, without hooking them up to a metabolic cart, it's hard to see, but for the most part, in that zone 2, they're actually burning more fat for fuel. So if we were to hook them up to a metabolic cart, we could see that their intensity, they're burning 65 to or more % of fat for fuel during that exercise, as opposed to somebody who's metabolically inflexible. If we were to hook them up to a cart and they're running in their zone 2 range or very low intensity, if their body's burning 75% carbohydrate at that intensity, then their body's going to have a hard time transitioning from that carbohydrate source to fat. And so that's where that improving what we eat through the day and exercise can make us get more metabolically flexible.
Mm-hmm. So we have a lot of fat stored, but not very much carbohydrates. So that's our limiter. So it's not only just a body composition thing, it's a performance thing. It lets you perform better and longer.
Yeah. There's a whole lot of books out there. I know Matt Fitzgerald has that race weight book, but when you're a big person and you've got to climb up a hill, whether you're running or on a bike, it's going to be a lot harder than somebody who weighs 145 pounds. So yeah, the more that we can get that extra weight off, we're going to improve performance for sure. So why do we want to choose metabolic efficiency? The big thing is it reduces or eliminates the risk of GI distress during those long races. I don't know about you, but I've had those GI issues at a few races.
Oh, yeah.
And if you talk to some people who might be walking towards the end or are disgusted with their race results, most of them will all at some point during the race have had GI distress. So it also improves nutrition partitioning for energy use, that fat for fuel versus carbohydrate for fuel. And the nice side effect is that it does improve your body weight and body composition. So as we teach our bodies to become better fat burners at that lower intensity exercise, we're naturally going to get rid of some of that stored fat that most age groupers have and desperately want to get rid of so that they can improve their times. Another great side effect is that it improves our health markers, like our A1C panels, our overall cholesterol, and it reduces our risk of some of the chronic diseases that are out there. How do we do all that? By having proper amounts of protein, fiber, and fat. And by using those nutrients, macronutrients and micronutrients, we're able to stabilize our blood sugar. So on this little graph here on the right, it has the blue line that's going up and down. That's our blood sugar through the day when you're a carb burner on most of the American diet. And you can kind of see the unhappy faces up there. But once we start using protein, fat, and fiber to control our blood sugar levels, we get that nice, almost even red dotted line with those nice happy faces there. These are just some of the benefits of optimizing our blood sugar through the day. You can see on there body fat loss. An interesting one on there is lower calorie needs per hour. As we become more efficient and our body adapts, naturally we don't need as many calories as we once had to. And for racing, that can be very important because we can only take in so many calories per hour during exercise. So what we're trying to teach is how we eat through the day. In each of these 4 pictures here, one of the big things, I don't know if you can spot what's missing in them, but is a lot of the carbohydrates on there or processed foods. So you can see a lot of the whole foods on there in the lower right with that salmon or fish. There's a lot of broccoli in there. So there's a good example of protein, fat, and fiber. The salmon has a lot of omega-3 fats, and the broccoli has quite a bit of fiber in it. So we're not going to be spiking our blood sugar with that type of meal. How do we implement metabolic efficiency? With protein and fat. That's our first key to implementing it. When you're choosing your proteins, don't get too caught up in the science. And what I mean by that is don't get too caught up with counting calories. In fact, we don't like to count calories because sometimes the stress cost from that is going to cause even more problems. So don't get caught up with counting calories. Don't get caught up with the percent of leanness of meats because we need those fats from the meat. Choose what you like, but don't overdo it. Personally, I like ribeye steaks. But when you buy a ribeye steak, it's usually about 22 ounces when I only need to be eating 5 to 6 ounces of that. I don't need to go eat 2 ribeye steaks because I like steak.
Right. So it's a big deal there. It's just portion size. I mean, what would be a good portion? How many ounces?
It's going to vary for each individual. And I'm going to go over that as we go into how to implement the eating strategies. But most people are going to just need anywhere from 5 to 6 ounces with each meal. When we're creating our meals, we always want to get protein on there first. Some people will ask me, well, hey, what about protein powder? It's not a whole protein in terms of coming from an animal, but protein powder is a great way to supplement it. sometimes after a workout, you can't just go grill a steak or chicken breast. So having protein powder is a great way to get in your protein. Mm-hmm. Saturated fat isn't as bad as the experts used to say, and that can get into some other debate, but not one that we're going to cover today. So
I got not a scientific question,
concerned.
But
what's that?
I hear a lot of people talking about different organic, not organic, grass-fed, grain-fed, causing a big fuss one way or another. What do you think about that? How'd you compare them?
Grass-fed is actually the best. Organic's kind of better. And then you have like the low-end store-bought butter, which is good. What you want to avoid, though, is like the manufactured type of fats. Like anytime you see margarine or I can't believe it's not butter, those are by far the worst. So you want to stay away from any type of manufactured fat. And some of the fats that are out there, the trans fats, those you want to avoid completely. So a great example of that is if you look at peanut butter. If it doesn't have that layer of oil up at the top of the jar, then it's got partially hydrogenated oil in it, and that's a trans fat. So you want to avoid that. If you choose the low-end store-bought butter, which is kind of good, it's still not bad, but obviously, as your budget allows, try to eat the best and better. Next up is we have fruits and vegetables. This is kind of really important here because that's where we get a lot of our vitamins and minerals from. So choose what you like, but you can't go, depending on what your goals are in the second bullet point. If your goal is weight loss and fat loss, you want to be eating 75% or more vegetables versus fruit. If you like where your weight's at and you just want to improve it just a little bit, you're going to stick to 50% or more vegetables with 50% fruit. And in rare cases, you can even eliminate fruit altogether. Absolutely no juices.
Why is that?
The reason for that is juices are more or less just all that sweet juice, which is sugar, taken from the juice with none of the fiber or nutritional benefits from it. So it tastes great, but it's not something our body absolutely needs. And another thing is we don't want to consume fruits alone. Fruits have that sugar content, which starts to spike our blood sugar. And even though it does have some fiber in it, we want to pair it with either a protein source or fat source so that our body's going to kind of extend out that digestion, and it's not going to have that same effect on our blood sugar that it would have if we ate it all by itself. And now for everybody's favorite, grains and starches. There's very few choices to choose from that haven't been refined or processed. And depending on our health goals and training cycles, and I'll get into this a little bit later, is that it's perfectly fine to have any types of grains and starches because those are those carbohydrates that we're going to use later on to meet our training workload. And we don't want to eat a whole lot of grains and starches because they have a very low protein content, which is still going to have a similar effect on our blood sugar. So all that we have to consider when we have an overall carbohydrate load, and that's how many carbohydrates we've ate for the day. So if our goal is fat loss, we need to start bringing down that carbohydrate load. They must be properly timed through the day for the right benefit.
What are some of the best grains, starches? What would you recommend?
Some of the greater starchy vegetables out there are sweet potatoes or wild rice. But for the most part, I would still try to stay away from grains unless you could see that they were whole grains, which are very rare to get these days. The last and final one is we call them misses. And remember when I said I still like cookies and brownies? Those are considered misses. So we're humans. We know what they taste like. So every now and then, it's not bad to kind of splurge a little bit, but you don't need to go overboard. So, a couple scoops of ice cream after a well-balanced meal once in a while, not too big of a deal. If it was after every dinner for 3 or 4 weeks, then yeah, that could be a problem. Because too much can set you back in your health and performance goals. So we've gone over how to identify the fats, proteins, and fibers with fruits and vegetables. So how do we utilize the different eating strategies to get us more metabolic efficient? And the most common one is the hand-to-hand model, where you fill up one hand always with protein first. And if you were to take out your hand right now and look at it, the protein that you would need would start at the bottom of your palm and go up until that kind of first line of your middle finger. That would be your protein source. And that protein source usually has the right amount of fat in it that you're going to need, so you don't have to go add like a couple pats of butter or any type of oil on top of that. And the other hand, you would fill with your vegetables. So I like to eat broccolini, and I actually kind of go over my hand, but I would picture my hand being completely full of as much broccolini as I could get. Periodization plates, different plates and portions that we use during our training periods. So during our base phase training and building that aerobic base, we'd probably choose something without any grains. It would be a lot of vegetables, protein, and fat, because we're not really into a lot of that higher intensity. For once we started getting to more race specific, where we've got longer intervals or higher intensity intervals, then we would introduce some of those carbohydrates to those meals so that we can get our bodies to perform at that higher intensity. The next one, low carb, high fat, that's kind of a controversial one these days. I know a lot of people now will see, like Chris Firm did. He does low carb, high fat, but at the same time, this is just an eating strategy. So depending on where you're at with your metabolic flexibility, then low carb, high fat is the way to go. And you do that by keeping your daily calories of carbohydrates from 10 to 30%, your protein anywhere from 20 to 30%, and your fat is 50 to 70% of your total calories. And fat adaptation and carbohydrate restoration. So athletes that are very well fat adapted, that can perform at those high intensities and still oxidize a lot of fat. Zach Baer is one that comes to mind. Is he might have some problems getting to those higher intensities, so we would use carbohydrate restoration the day before to make sure he's got enough carbohydrates to hit those high intensity intervals that he might have. What to use and when to use it. So if you have a very high daily carbohydrate intake, which when I was doing my first Ironman, I definitely had. My nutritionist would tell me I've got to have a whole lot of carbohydrates. Then you can't just quit cold turkey, because you're going to get cravings and you're going to go back to stuffing your face with, in my case, it was cookies. So we slowly start to reduce the carbohydrate intake. Next, we move to the hand-to-hand model. And that's for a non-athlete beginner, because it's really simple. Again, you're not counting calories, and like I explained, you're filling one hand with protein, the other hand with vegetables. So it's really easy. When you use the periodization plates, if you're in one of your training cycles, you're going to eat based upon your training cycle and needs. And foodies who like to toy around with all different types of foods, this is a really good one for them, because they can change out their foods without having too much of a problem. And we can also use it with just general fitness people as well. Low carb, high fat, that's if you really need to lose weight. You've already gone through the hand-to-hand models and carbohydrate unloading, so you're burning a whole lot more fat than the average American or athlete. So we use that to kind of get that change in body composition. And fat adaptation is for those advanced athletes or fat adapted athletes who need to get to those higher intensity needs. Okay, and one key to being metabolic efficient is nutrient timing. What you eat during your day affects your body 100% of the time, as opposed to when you only train for an hour or 2 hours, that only affects that 1 or 2 hours of your day. So when we wake up in the morning, if we're not working out, or we don't have a workout, we don't want to eat foods that are going to spike our blood sugar and cause it to crash later on, because what's going to happen is all those extra carbohydrates that we're not using, it's going to get stored as fat. We want to make sure that you're eating around your workouts. Using the example that I said before, if you don't have a morning workout, but you have a workout in the evening, we're going to time your meals through the day to meet the energy needs, and then we're going to introduce some carbohydrates to that meal that's about 2.5 to 3 hours before that workout in the afternoon or evening. The other play on that is if there's a workout in the morning and a workout in the evening, then you're going to have to get some carbohydrate in the morning, and you only need a little bit, probably about 30 minutes. You can have like a dew or a sports drink, something with some simple sugar, even a banana or a half a banana to get you through that morning workout. But then afterwards, we're going to introduce like maybe some sweet potatoes or another carbohydrate to replenish those carbohydrate stores so that you can still have enough energy to get through that afternoon workout.
Related to that fueling for training sessions specifically, I just love Generation UCAN. They've been a Tridot nutrition partner for a number of years. Can you talk just a little bit about Generation UCAN and how it works with metabolic efficiency?
Absolutely. I was introduced to Generation UCAN when I decided to get more metabolic efficient. And it's great because Generation UCAN is a slow release carbohydrate for your body, so it doesn't spike your blood sugar as you're exercising. It's a nice steady kind of drip system of energy as you're out there doing that 60-minute workout or 6-hour workout. And because it's such a slow digested carbohydrate source is what makes it so great for metabolic efficiency. Unlike some of the sports drinks that are all sugar that get dumped into your body and kind of just sit there, Generation UCAN is it's that nice slow release. So you're not kind of getting that blood sugar spikes as you're exercising.
Yep. Have you seen a lot of athletes have trouble with getting the protein they need in the morning? I see so many athletes, they skip that morning or don't think of having very much protein in the morning. They're generally carbs or grains or different things. How important do you think that is?
It's really important. 'Cause in today's fast-paced life, or athletes who have a family, they still got to get to work. They're very pressed on time, so they kind of grab food out of convenience, which is typically like a breakfast bar, maybe a muffin or a bagel, so it's very high in carbohydrates. Getting that protein and fat in the morning is super important. Most people are kind of in a slight ketogenic state after fasting for 8 hours during that sleep. So the first thing that we don't want to do is eat a whole lot of sugar. It's going to tell our body to start burning sugar through the day instead of fat. So by getting in that protein and fat, we're slowly starting to rebuild the muscle from the workouts from the previous day. We're telling our bodies, hey, we need to be burning fat. We don't need to be burning carbohydrates. So what I tell my athletes is have a protein shake with a tablespoon of MCT oil or coconut oil ready to go. It takes them 2 minutes to get it all mixed together and they're out the door.
One of the things I'd be curious what other kind of that that convenience factor is a big deal, because it's hard to implement anything even if you know the right things to do when it's just a pain in the rear. One of the things you mentioned earlier was the serving size of the protein. And a lot of times I find it easy, for an evening meal to have a normal portion, a larger portion, larger than you need, and just cutting that in half, eating one for the dinner and saving the next one for the morning, and having just little, strips of steak on some lettuce or spinach in the morning. It's a good way to get some protein in the morning. You don't have to get up and cook. Just, spend the time the evening before and then save half of it for the next morning.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's nothing wrong with having, steak and mixed vegetables from the night before for your first meal. The whole breakfast, lunch, and dinner is something that, society is kind of labeled, but our bodies, they don't care. If it's easier for you to chop up that meal from the night before and have it for both dinner and breakfast, then that's fine. At the end of the day, it all comes down to making sure that we're eating to what our body needs, not versus what we want. So that's another great way. And what some people will do is they'll pre-cook all their meals on their off day, and they'll throw it in their Tupperware containers, throw it in the freezer and fridge, so that as they're running out the door, they'll grab it and they'll have it when they're at their desk at work.
Yep, that's a great strategy.
Yeah, it's one that I used when I was first starting out, before I had the luxury of working from home, and it saved my life. So some of the common questions that I get asked a lot is this a ketogenic diet? It is absolutely not. A ketogenic
What's
diet.
Ketogenic?
A ketogenic diet is when your body is in a nutritional state of ketosis. So we achieve that by eating approximately 20 carbs a day, or 20 net carbs. There's two different views, but that's how we do it. We keep our carb levels extremely low so that our body creates ketone bodies from our free-formed fatty acids in our blood, which can then be used as an alternative fuel for our bodies instead of sugar. For most athletes, it's not sustainable long term, and our performance can definitely be affected by it. So I'm going to use Zach Bitter again, and Ben Greenfield is another one who kind of trains in that ketogenic state, or they properly time their fruits and vegetables or any type of sports nutrition products on race day or around training, so that their body uses that sugar right away, and they can easily still be in that nutritional state of ketosis at 150 grams of carbs a day. It's not something that we like to prescribe long term, because there's still a lot of research that has to be done with it. So metabolic efficiency is not a ketogenic diet, because based on our training load, sometimes we're going to need 100 grams of carbs a day. And if our minds are still stuck at, I need to be in ketosis, then it's going to set us back. Mm-hmm. Another question that I get is, can you still be metabolic efficient and be a vegan or vegetarian? And yes, you can. It's a little bit more difficult to get the eating strategies, because we're not allowed to bring in those animal protein sources, but it is doable. And another one I get, and this kind of stems from the paleo people, is, well, can I eat as much fruit as I want? And the answer to that is no. We went over that a little bit earlier, because fruit ultimately does have an effect on our blood sugar. Even though I'm an Ironman athlete, I sit at a desk most of the day. So if I'm eating fruit, without any protein or fat, then my blood sugar is still going to get up. My body's not needing the intensity to use that sugar that's in my blood, and ultimately it's going to get stored as fat. So you can have a little bit of it, just not as much as you want.
Well, speaking of the kind of opposite end of the spectrum is vegan and vegetarian, is that paleo. How is this different? How would you compare and contrast a paleo diet to metabolic efficiency strategies that you're talking about?
So paleo is really strict on the quality of food that you can get. If you're following paleo to a T. It's grass-fed butter, grass-fed beef, or organic fruits, organic vegetables. It tends to put a lot of emphasis on the quality, which at times can even more and more people are starting to see that it's causing a health issue when your food's too clean, so to speak. But they also incorporate a lot of grains into their diet. Most paleo people are the CrossFit world. Paleo is really big there. But they also have a whole lot of workouts. So you can use a modified paleo and still be metabolically efficient. It just eliminates some of the foods there with regards to grains. And another one I get is, what about Whole30? Whole30 is awesome because it centers around a whole lot of whole foods, minimal processed, which is what we want. The thing with Whole30 is they say do it for 30 days as opposed to, I say just keep doing it. You're still choosing nutrients over calories, so keep doing it. Don't give yourself a reason to stop at 30 days.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you, Chris. It's about sustainability, and the metabolic efficiency is something you want to do for a lifetime. It's a lifestyle, it's just a way that you feed and fuel your body. You mentioned, the program Metabolic Efficiency is based on Bob Seebahar's work, and I know him. I've known him for a while, and he's just a really solid research. I've been doing this for a long time. I mean, that's his career. So I appreciate you making your time available to us today to go through and deliver this content. So how can someone reach you? I mean, you're a Tridot coach, but if they wanted to ask you questions or work with you directly?
To work with working with me is more beneficial because you're going to get more out of a highly personalized approach. I do training and race day nutrition plans. So as your training goes through your training cycle, I take a look at it and program all your nutrition needs in direct access to me. More and more people have a whole lot of questions that just you need to have a resource available to ask them all the time. And you can find me on my website, www.evolutionmultisport.com. You can email me at chris.holly@evolutionmultisport.com or chris.holly@tridot.com. And I give all Tridot athletes 20%. And I also wanted to note there's another coach on the Tridot staff, Jessica Baxter, who's also trained in metabolic efficiency. Mm. So you can contact either me or her to work with us directly.
Well, a lot of places to find you, so that's great.
Yeah. I found that the more that I can make myself accessible and kind of get the message out there that you don't have to go into any race with poor nutrition and suffer from GI distress or the things that I struggled with of, hey, I'm training for an Ironman, I'm not losing weight, I'm gaining weight, and I'm eating all this food and just that's what the experts are telling me, but I don't quite feel right. The more that I can get it out there that, hey, there's a different way out there, the better.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Chris. I really appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jeff. It was a great time, and love to get the information out.
Yeah, and I'd also like to thank everyone else for listening today. This has been some really valuable content. Nutrition is often referred to as a fourth discipline, so it's super important. If you want to connect with Chris or other Tridot coaches, go to www.tridot.com. If you want to know more about our technology, we have a free trial, so we'd love for you to take a test drive. Just click on the free trial button at tridot.com. This is Jeff Booher. I'm the founder of Tridot, and this has been the Tridot Triathlon Podcast. We'll see you down the road.